Hey Deb, welcome everyone who's just joined us. You're with the EO Boost, day 2. Loads of great sessions ahead of us. Right now, though, we get stuck into an interview. Our morning keynote interview yesterday was with a B2C business. Today, we're looking at a B2B firm that's employee-owned. Our guests work for a firm called Aber and are in the instruments business, but they're nothing to do with music. Rather, they support the brewing, biotech and biorenewables industries with measuring equipment, proper good science stuff. The 4 founders, who met through their connection to Aberystwyth University, set up 32 years ago on a science park in the area. And I'm guessing they were too busy with their new science business to think too hard about a name, calling their new company simply Aber, short for Aberystwyth. So plenty of hard work later, and they found themselves with a fantastically successful business on their hands, with global customers and distributors, and the Queen's Award for Export Achievement. And it was at this point they wanted to draw a conclusion on their exit strategy. So tell us what happened next. Let's give a warm EO Boost welcome to Aber Instruments MD, Matt Lee, and its HR manager, Emma Thomas. Hello, Matt and Emma. You are in the same room, are you not?
We are. Thank you for that welcome, Penny. Very good. Yeah, we got a little screen between us. So that's what the bar is.
Oh, brilliant. It's how we're making it work, isn't it? So it's fantastic to see you both. And I've got so many questions for you, but I do want to remind the audience just briefly that you can ask a question. This is what it's all about. And I'm dying to get to your questions. We had some fantastic ones yesterday, actually. But let's set the scene, first of all, with some ideas on what Aber does and what the journey's been like into EO, because I know it's been a bit challenging and quick, and then it's had this kind of pace to it that's been quite unusual, hasn't it? And I know Emma can explain that. But Matt, first of all, what is Aber? What do you do? And what's all this to do with brewing? And someone put in the chat earlier about having a connection with Bass and making their pints even better and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, Aber, basically what Aber is doing is it's doing maths and physics and engineering for biologists. And biologists want to measure live cells, and in brewing, that's yeast. In biotech, that's cell cultures that make medicines. So we monitor those cells, we optimize the processes, and our customers get a better result. Better beer, better medicine, or whatever. So obviously, in today's climate, we're very fortunate that vaccine work is applicable to what we do. And so, as you look at our website, you'll see as many links to the vaccine industry at the moment.
Yeah, and great news this week on the vaccines. So the founders that I mentioned in the introduction there, 4 founders, what was on their minds when they started looking at their exit strategy? Had some peeled away before then? What were the reasons as well, not wanting to be full-time owners anymore? What was the reason for not selling the business? Have you got any insight into that?
Yeah, so I think for them, it was actually quite a long, torturous journey in some ways, a little thought process. In that, I think they originally started back at the millennium, dabbling with shares and putting shares to the employees and things. And then over a period of about 10 years, when they actually exited, they had gone through this sort of journey where they'd explored various options, set up EBTs and SIPs and all sorts of things before they finally sort of decided, employee ownership is the way forward. So they went through a lot of different variants of employee, trying things before they actually settled on proper employee ownership. They definitely, they were innovators in their own right. They originally started the company in Centre for Alternative Technology, which is, if you think 20 years ago about green energy and stuff like that, was completely new and left afield really for most people. So, they weren't shy of trying something different and something new. And that definitely appealed to them. They definitely weren't, they weren't in it for the maximum buck. They were there to make an important contribution to the community. They definitely believed in that. The business was a family-owned business, even though it didn't have a family owner as such. It's been very close-knit always, really. So I think that was, the strong influences in how they behaved. Yeah.
And Emma, morning. What sort of journey has it been like to EO? Was it so the straightforward decision got there eventually, and then a change of hands? But I'm guessing as HR the HR person within Aber, you were very, very instrumental, if you forgive the pun, in getting EO off the ground. What was it like? What was the decision like? And then what did you do after that? What were your next steps?
Well, I'm quite fortunate that when I joined, the EO decision was already firmly in place, and I was lucky enough to join a company that had, that enabled that for us, or began that process for us. But the process had begun, but it sort of had plateaued a little bit, and people were just getting on with it as it was and not really questioning it, and just enjoying the great ethos that there was within the organisation and the relaxed, friendly, family feel culture. And it wasn't until we realized there was a bit of a wake-up call, and we realized we had to do something about solidifying things and making sure that we really ran with it in a proper way, that we were forced to make our roots and make things strong, change our articles and solidify the EO culture within everything that we do, really.
I've heard that's a bit of a kind of worry or a challenge after a certain amount of celebrating, to do with we've gone EO and all the staff are involved and this is great. And then the challenge is to keep that going, keep the momentum going, keep staff engaged with it, keep people interested in decision making and problem solving. Was that shift in culture challenging for you to deal with and change? What did you do to address it?
I think knowing the right thing to do, you question what the right thing to do is to begin with, but the right thing to do is to talk to the people and to engage the people. And we're going through our second process of that, actually, in line with what the COVID situation and how that's changed our ways of working. But originally we did it 3 years ago, was it?
Yeah,
3 years ago.
That, yeah.
And we spoke to everybody to truly understand what it was collectively that people wanted. So yes, there may have been some people that wanted something slightly different, but we brought everybody's views together in a massive document and deciphered it, had one-to-ones and small group focus groups, and everyone agreed the outcomes then. So it was good for everyone.
And how many staff have you got? How many staff were involved in that? Was it quite a heavy bit of work, or how long did it take? Just give us a flavour of the actual work involved in that piece of investigation, I suppose, that line of inquiry.
The preparing for it took several months, making sure that we were going to ask the right questions, that we considered the right things, spending time together and understanding what the real problems were in the first place, and thinking about the future. The focus groups were done over a period of about a month in total, I think. And then we had to decipher all that information as a group as well. So, and then there was lots of legal work to be done with a vote that everyone had to agree on, changing of articles of association and lots of things like that. So I would say 4 to 6 months, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, if you count from very beginning to very end, it's probably about 9 months. Because you start off with a small working group that you need to sort of drive it through, are really the key adopters and interesters, and then they kind of build more and more people into it till you've got everybody included, really. So that does take a bit of time.
And how many staff?
And as you say,
how many staff
legal work backwards too.
At the time, we were probably about 38. Today, we're just about hitting 50. Sorry, so we're just getting to 50. So, and we're still recruiting. So,
okay, and just go back a little bit, if you don't mind, Matt. Yesterday we heard Riverford's about the founder's wishes. Very important, apparently, when you're setting up an EO business, where the founder expresses their vision, mission and purpose for the business. It's a guideline for future owners. I suppose it's something that's been useful, I guess, for Aber. Were you left with decent founder's wishes to help you either transition for EO and then reiterate when you came to this work with Emma later on?
Not really, no. So the founders were very good, and they handed it over into employee ownership, but they didn't really leave us with a guiding principles or some philosophy that they had written down. They kind of just went, okay, we're off now. And that was that first year. After that, we kind of just kept going, and then there was definitely what I sort of an uncomfortable period in the business where everyone's kind of looking at each other going, hang on, I actually do own this business now, but it isn't doing what I want it to do. It isn't serving what I want it to be. And, the first changes we made there were really about converting the share scheme from one that buys out employees to one that actually serves employees that are in the business and running it now, So there's a big step we had to do there. But I would highly recommend to anyone who's a founder, if you actually got distinctive, things you care about, please write them down for the future generations. Because a lot of what our work was actually looking at each other and going, well, what is it we're about? And then writing that down and defining it.
Yeah, we'd always talked about our values. But actually, before we defined them in the guiding groups, if you ask somebody what they were, everyone sort of went, oh, well, I'm not sure. But now we've got our values written down and we understand what they are. So yeah,
there was this great Aber culture, but if you asked anyone what is the Aber culture, they couldn't actually spell it out to you.
So well, that must have been well, that's great to hear. But that first year then of having the reins and being used to a system or a culture where maybe it was command and control, it was maybe just traditional hierarchy, to suddenly be given ownership of a firm must have been quite a challenge, just to step up to be business owners all of a sudden. How did that feel for you, Matt?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think we didn't realize it was going on at the time. It's funny you say it was like a challenge there, but actually, I mean, the business was fortunately running reasonably well in the sense that money was coming in and we could pay everyone and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of a slow burn, really, that people were kind of like, hang on a minute, we are actually making money and things here. What's happening to it? How are we going to distribute this money? Because we're not buying the founders out anymore. Things like that was suddenly bubbling up in people's heads. And then the sort of frustration was building up really across the business.
Okay. We've had some good questions in so far, by the way. We've got, my next question, actually, Ian Snaith, you pipped me to it, was could you outline the basic structure that emerged after amending the articles of the company? So where are you at now? Just give us the idea of what model you've gone for, what structure you've got.
Yeah, so we're operating a hybrid model now. We actually have an EBT, a SIP, and an EOT all in a trust company. So the EOT is there, it always owns 55% or more of the business. So that's kind of the insurance policy that we meet all the EOT legal requirements, but also ensures, the control always lies with the employees forever. We then have a SIP for allow the UK people to buy shares in the sensible way SIPs allow. And the EBT is a pool, so that people can trade between the pool, basically. So everyone in the company does have to own shares themselves. After 6 months, they get given induction shares, and after that, they can buy up to a certain amount year on year. So yeah, everyone has to be a share owner as well as an employee.
And then in terms of decision making, the day-to-day running, what sort of councils or forums or groups have you got in place, and how much more work is that for people? We've had a question from Simon Coots. It's a little bit different to what I've just asked, but how did you balance the need to get involved with setting up the EO side of the business with day-to-day work? And then I suppose the follow-on is, how do you proceed? How do you get the day-to-day work done and be an EO business? Sorry, those are two.
So the first part of that is we have, an executive board, a leadership team below that, and then everyone else really. So we try and operate quite a flat structure normally. And sort of next to that is a council, which is elected, and the chair of the council is on the trust. So that kind of completes the circle, if you like, and holds the executive board to account in terms of the whole business. So we've got a circular control pattern going on, which is very nice. And that's kind of, in my mind, what EO is all about. What was the second part of the question again?
It was about, it actually came from our viewer about balancing the time in getting it up and running. So how did you balance the desire or need to get involved with setting up the EO side of the business with the day-to-day work? I think the question is, EO sounds like a massive piece of work to get off the ground. Is it?
Yes.
Definitely.
Absolutely, and it's ongoing.
So how did you
It's all about having the legal structure in place, but if you don't continuously communicate and continuously operate like an EO business, then you won't get the value from it.
And for us, it's about making sure we continually understand that we're taking the business in the right direction. So the day-to-day running is down to the board and the leadership team, but actually we have to make sure all the time that we come back to our ethos and values and our guiding purpose. And it's for the employees to make sure that we're doing the right thing as well. So to keep continually communicate and keep talking is really, really important.
So to give an example of that, in the pandemic now, the business is running very well, but it's a very weird way of operating. So people have been building up frustrations and things they want to talk to us about, both now and for the future after the pandemic. So the leadership team has actually been taking small groups out of the business to meet outside in a socially safe space in the woodland to talk to people and try and engage with people. So that is always ongoing.
Say that again. You're taking people out into the woodland. Can you?
Yeah.
Did you say that?
I did say that, yeah.
But we've had an amazing response. Yeah, we've had an amazing response to that. So I took a group out on Monday, and when I came home, my feet were like ice blocks, but it was really good. It was really beneficial. And the feedback from the guys that I took out was really, they really enjoyed it and would like to do it more frequently. They'd like to do it twice a year. So, we listen. So that's the most important thing. But as well as those groups, so the council, the boards, the leadership team, we also have things like the employee charity group, and we have an environmental group as well. So time has to be taken out of people volunteer for those groups, and those are really important groups for our business as well. So it's making sure that the pot that we have for charity is distributed in the right way within the right areas, and the environmental group makes sure that we're focused for the future and that we have those ethical considerations as well, and benefit people's well-being at the same time with some of the things that they're thinking about too. But I think the time has to be factored into. The time has to be factored. The time has to be factored into everybody's working time, and it's a balance. So making sure everyone has ownership for their own roles and everybody understands that they have to manage their time to complete those things, and they can do these things alongside and balance everything. But it's still part of your working life. It's still part of your job. So
the issue of time is an interesting one. Hearing from Camilla yesterday, who is the HR manager at Make Architects, she was talking about how people are trusted enough to do all of their work. So maybe for a non-EO structured business where time is, you're measured on input. So you work 9 to 5 or, whatever shift you've got, and then you go home and that's it. And you're not kind of trusted to do less or do more. Is that something that you think EO has sort of softened for your business at all, in terms of how you measure people's activities and all the rest of it? You trust them enough to get on with it?
Yeah, we don't really measure people at all, I don't think.
No, we don't. I think the great thing is we have confidence and trust, as you said, in everybody, that we're all working to one common goal. And that really works here. It truly, truly does. We're all in it together. So everybody has a part to play and everybody does contribute their whole self.
So to give an example of that, pandemic example, that really is, we have not furloughed anyone or had any time off at all during the pandemic. And when we talked to our auditing accountants about that, who audits hundreds and hundreds of companies across the whole of Wales, he thought we were the only company that he audited that was in that category. And okay, we got good sales because of the business we're in, but it's also about people's commitment to the business to actually just, do what needs to be done, really.
And we have great people.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about your people in a little while. I'm keen to know how you find people in West Wales with science, in their blood, sort of thing. So let's go to some audience questions, because we've got a very popular one that's being asked. Have you done all this on your own, or have you had external support, coaching, mentoring, leadership training, business skills training? What have you needed, and where have you found the answers to that?
So we've done a lot of it on our own, to be fair, but we do use as much help as we can get, really. Yeah, we have mentors. We've used JGAD, the sponsors, before now. We use Ben Watson, who, to do our legal stuff, and TLT team. We use Chris Heald as well for validating some of these working groups and processes we've been talking about. But training is a very big thing across the whole company, whatever it is, whether it's EO or just part of your job. We expect people to be learning all the time, really. And you can say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about people's own want and desire to do that and to continue to be better and to be their best selves and bring their best selves together. So we all support anything, any training. It has to balance, but that's our aim, is to make sure that we continually move people forward so that they're able to add to their skill sets to improve our business at the end of the day.
And what about you personally, Emma? Have you had support in your function as HR manager? I mean, it's a massive role, isn't it, to take on when you've got EO to grapple with as well?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm completing my master's in human resource management. So that's been ongoing for a couple of years part-time, but it's
that's not support, that's an extra bit of work. That's a massive amount of work.
But no, it's good, and it's useful to bounce what we do off other people and what other people do as a group. And I think people still can't quite believe that we do things in the way that we do. So it's refreshing to speak to other people and share our experiences.
Is your final dissertation going to be along the lines of something to do with employee ownership?
Well, I have found that there's very little in the literature about employee ownership and the different methods of engagement and how employee ownership is so important for that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to add to that and have some more sources to gain from.
Yes, absolutely. Well, good luck with that. Very impressive. We've had a couple of technical questions from the audience members. Why is it important that everyone is a personal owner of shares? Matt, you mentioned that everyone is into the shares. After 6 months, they get option to buy more. Is that something that's really important, that people own those shares? Or has just historically always been there?
It is. I think it is important. I think it's good to have that engagement, but you do find across the demographic of your employees, some do the bare minimum, some do the maximum. There's a spread of involvement, and I don't think there's much wrong if you've got an EO company and everything's held in the trust. I don't think there's much wrong with that model. It's certainly a lot more efficient to run. Administrating the share process is another big job that we have to do all the time.
And then another technical question: what happens to personally owned shares if someone leaves? When someone leaves?
Well, there's a forced sale, so they're immediately bought back, basically. Okay. We have 2 dealing days a year where you can trade shares. So one of the idea with shares is you hold them for a medium length of time, so that you would build them up over 5-10 years, and then when you need to buy a new car or put a new roof on your house or something, you can cash them in at a dealing day to get the value to solve a problem in your personal life, really. But if you leave the business, there's a forced sale at the day you leave, basically, so then they cashed in. So everything has to be within the Aber group, basically. Okay.
Another popular question, and this, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, maybe you can shed some light on it. Was there ever any concern or doubt? This is going back to when EO was the decision to go EO was made, and maybe the following years. Was there ever any concern or doubt that you might not be able to pay the full amount to the founders? I mean, obviously that's an issue, isn't it, for anyone who's running a non-EO business, is looking at succession planning, and they're thinking, right, this sounds good, but would I actually get my money?
Well, the founders bought themselves out over a period of time, basically. So they were slowly buying themselves out of the company's profits over quite a long period of time, and they had control of that anyway because they were in control of the business at that point. So they set a new share price every year, and then they chose how many they're going to sell that year. So the business was growing throughout that time, but when they left, the share price was like 50 pence or something, and now we're fast approaching £3.
Wow, and that's surprising as well. You're no different to any other EO business I've met. It just doesn't want to talk about. You don't want to brag about growth, profit, sales. How it's all going. But actually, you've had a huge uptick in your numbers, haven't you? During the pandemic. Are you part of the dash to deliver vaccines, maybe? But tell me about the growth. 27% growth in Q1 in 2020.
Yeah, that's been quite.
Huge.
Yeah, that's been quite surprising a little bit, really. I mean, we went into the pandemic really quite cautiously. We didn't know what was going to happen with the whole. We sell to the world. We're 95% export, so the world economy is what matters to us, really. And we weren't sure if all the money was going to get tied up somewhere, and we just wouldn't be able to make sales or whatever, because our equipment is quite expensive. It's a big capital investment. But everyone still needs medicines. Everyone, it turns out, still likes beer. So we've managed. Those businesses have kept going, and they kept buying from us. So that's really good. The vaccine work is more. We're seeing some sales from that, but I think that's going to be, all our sales processes are quite a slow burn because it's so high knowledge. So that will come, we're working on that hard, and it'll come in the coming years probably. So yeah, we're really pleased that, we've put in a cautious forecast for this year, but actually we're exceeding it very nicely, and we're able to continue. And one of the big things there, actually, I think, is being in West Wales, where the levels of COVID have been quite low, and we've managed to keep the factory running in a socially distanced way. And that's really important for actually churning out the equipment that everyone needs across the world.
We were quite well placed with our IT equipment and things like that, just to send everybody else home. So it was a very quick process, and we did that ahead of the government as well. We just literally picked up phones, picked up laptops, and we went to work from home. And yeah, everyone did a fantastic job, and everyone pulled together and worked really, really hard as well. So
that is one of the advantages of EO business, is that a lot of your profits should be reinvested in the business to keep improving the business. So we're quite well ahead of the curve in terms of home working facilities and things. We hadn't used most of them because we're still in the office, but it turned out we already had it. It was already, worked out and been built in. And the same with the factory, which is still running. We completed the revamp of that, the spring this year. So there's plenty of space for people to spread out in it. So that's quite fortunate as well. But again, it's about reinvesting in that building and spending the time and energy to get it how you want it.
And you've got plans for growth, haven't you? Quite big plans, is that right?
Yeah, so we're basically trying to double turnover in 3 years at the moment.
Pardon, say that again, Matt, just to really make that clear for everyone. You want to what?
Double turnover in 3 years.
Double turnover in 3 years. That's fantastic. But Emma, that must leave you with a bit of a challenge on your plate to find people to join Aber in West Wales. I'm not imagining, and it's a vastly densely populated area. Where do you get your talent from? And does EO help bring that talent into the business?
So yes, it does. When you're talking to people, they understand that there's a difference in working for an employee-owned organisation. Sometimes it's hard for people to really grasp, I think, but it certainly helps engage people's interests when they're looking for roles with you. We have a university here, so we're quite fortunate with software. We have good universities within Aberystwyth, within Wales, that have good electronics experience. Our instrumentation is highly electronics focused. So, but there's a very, very diverse, wide range of skills within the business. So it's not just focusing on the science. It's focusing on all different kind of aspects like marketing, accounts, IT. There's so many different skills, software that we need within the business. But it's about thinking about the future generations as well, and working with the local schools to talk to the future of employment, the future talent to come through, and making sure that they're aware of us, that we're quite a quiet business within the area because we don't have a market as such within the area. So people aren't necessarily as aware of us. So it's about making sure we've raised the profile within the area to know that, yes, you may go away to university to do your different different degrees that we require, but there's always potentially a job for you to come back to in Aberystwyth in the local area, and it's part of our guiding purpose and our ethos and values to provide sustainable employment within the area.
So there's no moving over to, the Silicon Valley of the UK and Cambridge, or setting up a big place near Cardiff or anything like that. You're fixed in Aber. You have to be with that name, don't you?
Yeah, but it's not about the name. It's about what the people want. The people want the core business to be in Aberystwyth. So that's what we'll do. But that's not to say we don't have people outside of Aberystwyth. We do have remote workers within Britain, and we do have a subsidiary in America as well, which is employing 3 people in America. So, with Brexit and everything else, maybe we'll end up with a subsidiary in the EU as well. Who knows? So we'll do what we need to do to run the business and keep that growing. But the core decision making and culture of the business will probably always come from Aberystwyth.
We're having a few questions about decision making and the role of the council, the employee council. Couple of questions really that tie together nicely. First of all, what role do your employee councils play within the company, and what changes have they made? If you can give me an example of that. And the second question is, do employees make company decisions, or is that top management that does that and they still have the overall say? So let's take the first bit. What do your employee council get up to? What input do they have?
No, you can.
So, I mean, the council is, in a way, they don't sort of do anything. They don't take actions in themselves. What they do is they sort of check all the actions that are going on in the business and evaluate how that business is running and whether that's following, are we living up to our guiding purpose and values? Are people happy in the business? Are the employees being represented rightly? And arguably, if the business is running correctly, the council doesn't need to do anything except sort of look at what's going on and monitor and sort of tick the box going, yes, it's all fine.
Yeah, it's there to represent the people, whereas not to run the business. So the day-to-day is definitely not part of the council's repertoire. It's only if maybe things are veering off piece, that things are happening in perhaps a way that they don't necessarily collectively agree with, or the majority, and then it's there to question the actions of the board and hold them to account if needs be. But fortunately, we haven't really been in that situation yet.
Yeah, so as managing director, I have a conversation with the chair of the council fairly regularly, where he challenges me, asks me questions about what's going on, and I can also ask him what he thinks the employees are thinking about the business. So that's kind of a conversation we have. Yeah. There's also sorry, come on.
No, go on, Matt.
Well, there's also a set list of tasks that the employee council looks at. They look at the accounts from time to time and various other things to make sure, so they've got a set list of sort of formal things they look at, but they can look at anything they want to.
Okay. We had a question, which I've just lost, obviously, about, I just lost it. It's just gone. It got superseded by some other question. Now I've lost it. So no big deal. We'll move on. Talking about EO to new recruits, you've got these wonderful growth plans to double in 2 years, 3 years.
3 years. Yeah.
Fairly soon, let's say. Okay. A lot of work for Emma there. One question that's come in: how do you go about describing to a new recruit what EO is all about and what Aber, how does it work? Does it actually help sell to new recruits? Oh yeah, well, I'm going to come here. If you got looking at graduates, talented graduates with first-class honours degrees who could go and work pretty much anywhere in STEM, why should they come to Aber? Does EO make a difference?
I think so, yes. I'm quite confident that it does. But I think it's quite difficult for you to understand it when you haven't lived it. So trying to explain it, sometimes you do almost feel a little bit like a salesperson when you're talking about it, and it sounds too good to believe. But when people quickly realise that it really is a very different place to work. So it's about talking about all the benefits and the engagement and the fact that they have a say in the way we operate the business. And that can be really hard for people to grasp, especially if they're graduates and they haven't worked in a world of work before, and they may only have maybe their parents' influence on what the world of work is like, or maybe retail experience of what the world of work is like. And actually to come and work for us is a really, really different experience. But they very, very quickly understand that what we've said it is the reality. I know when I started working here, within 2 weeks, I decided that this was going to be my job for life. So I hope nobody gets fed up with me.
And would the employees have a say in that then? If they get fed up with you, we need a new HR manager.
I don't know about that, actually.
We've had a great question from Jake Hallett that follows on with that. Whilst doubling turnover in 3 years, how do you intend to keep your culture growing? So you worked very hard with focus groups and over a 9-month, 10-month period to reinvigorate EO at Aber. But how do you intend, what's your plan to keep culture growing and going during these growth plans? Because managing 50 people is a lot different to managing 100 people or involving them in your decision making as well.
Yeah, that's something that we're really aware of, and we're really mindful and conscious of, and that's part of the conversations that we've been having in the focus groups more recently, to gain ideas from other people about how we can be sure we do that. So we're looking at all kinds of different things, and we'll bring all that work back together shortly, but we are aware of it, and I think that's the most important first step to make sure that we don't lose our family feel. And we do realize that even with COVID, we've taken on a lot of remote workers. We took on somebody in the summer who was the first person we'd ever taken on completely remotely. We didn't have any face-to-face interaction. And it's making sure that those people get to feel our family feel culture, and that they understand what being part of our employee ownership organization is. So we're aware that there's work to do there.
Yeah, it's definitely our biggest challenge at the moment, actually. And the pandemic has really highlighted some of the areas where we're weak. Yeah.
So what's your hunch on what activity you'll have to do in order to do that? What, any sort of plans or sketches at the moment that you can talk about? You think, actually, we know that we're going to have to do this or keep this going. Just put some flesh on the bones for us about that.
So we know that communication is really, really important, but we also have realised that as much face-to-face interaction is going to be important. So how we enable that going forward, is something that we really have to work on together collectively. It's not for one person to decide. We have to come together to understand how we do that. And that will mean time out of people's day-to-day working as well to facilitate that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the surprising factor probably to anyone who's new at Aber, is we will say to you, you need to stop doing your work now and go to the woods to talk to people. And that's a bit weird, really, isn't it?
But they enjoy it when we get there.
Once they get there, they understand it, and they start to get what it's all about.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall during that new recruit induction. So you're going to have to go to the woods on a regular basis, and it's going to be part of the. Yeah, you perhaps don't want to mention that too readily. So the culture at Aber, what would you say it was? A family feel? People know each other. Everyone knows each other's names, perhaps, or at least they know where they work. So that's really useful. You mentioned communication, and it can't just be having, days in the woods and meetings. But I've worked in organisations where people have lots of meetings, a lot of communication, but none of it particularly pleasant or rewarding. So what is it that you do or could do more of to make it sing? Make it that place where everyone feels like they've got a voice, and not just feel like they've got a voice, but actually have a voice. It's not lip service. We sometimes see that in other big organisations, a bit of lip service. Oh yeah, let's have a meeting. Oh yeah, we're listening. Nothing gets done. So how do you ensure that doesn't happen?
So yeah, we have to listen and we have to follow through on those things. We can't, that's the apps. We lose all trust in everyone if they told us what they wanted collectively and we didn't act on any of that. That's the key part, is to make sure we act on it. But I think going back a little bit to what you were saying before, we were very mindful of the people and the space and the family feel when we created we've had a refit on both buildings that we own. So yes, there are some people that are dispersed and work remotely and over in America as well. But the hub of both buildings is a social area. So we've got a smaller social area over in the manufacturing facility, but a bigger one over in our main office area. And that is for everyone. So yes, it's not utilized at the moment because hardly anybody is there. But if you walk into that room, you instantly understand that coming together is a really, really important thing, and that spending time together is key to making sure that everyone's engaged, productive, and feels valued in what they do. And I know it sounds like a small thing that a room might be able to do that, but actually it does. People are gobsmacked when they see the size of it and the facilities that are there for everyone. So I know that's just one small factor, but it's about lots of different things that make us what we are, really.
Yeah, it gets people out of those apartments, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very difficult to actually describe that part of the business, really, because it's got to be ingrained in your culture, really. And at Aber, I think it's almost ingrained to the point where we don't know it's there. We've definitely, I've had a brand new manager come to work for us, and he said, we've gone through some tasks, whatever, and he said, "Oh, so you actually do, so you do mean it when you want to take care of your employees, you're not just saying it, you do actually mean it in this business." And that's what you're kind of referring to there. And yeah, so you've just got to mean it and follow through on it. And I think it's just about actually putting the people first, and employees first, and the numbers and other things just come second.
Yeah, it's about understanding everybody as well, and knowing that everyone's different and everyone has slightly different requirements, but knowing that they have the confidence that they can come if they need to, and that we'll do the right thing by everybody.
And would you say that trust on both ways, you trust your employees enough to listen to them and take action on what they're saying, and they trust that you're going to do that? So your new manager that you mentioned, Matt, has yet to perhaps feel that trust and see it in action. But it sounds like it's a very important part of your culture. And I can understand that defining culture, explaining it to somebody else is really hard when you're living it, and hopefully, getting everyone involved in it. But trust is at the core of it, I would have thought.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that the pandemic has highlighted, is that the people who already were together before the pandemic have that trust relationship already and can work very easily remotely. But if you're new to the business and you haven't had the close interaction with your colleagues and learn to build the trust and simulate that, it's a lot harder to do it remotely. So yeah, definitely that's something that we learn more about with the pandemic, and things we will work to improve on as we go forward.
And expressing values. A lot of companies have got that. Well, everyone's got a value. We've got company values, haven't we? Yeah, brilliant. And we've printed them on a mouse mat. And so everyone's going to live them and understand them now. Everyone can rattle them off. How do you help live values? First of all, what are your values? It's not a test, by the way. If you can't remember, that's fine. But what are your values, and how do you help them live in that culture? So you talk about appraisals, don't you? You've got appraisals and they sort of come out there. Tell me more about that, Emma.
So our values have got key headings: employees, responsibilities, information, excellence, and workplace environment. And then there's content underneath those things.
Yeah, they don't fit on a mouse mat.
No, they don't fit on a mouse mat. No. And we all engaged in them. We all decided on them, and they're built into our articles of association. But once we'd done that piece of work, and of course we had new employees coming in, everybody is aware of them when they join, and we talk about them a little bit. But then you go about your daily business and your work, and you just think, oh yeah, we've got values, but actually nobody talks about them in detail. So we realized that actually we needed an opportunity to talk about them in a set time. So we don't have performance reviews. We have reviews where it's an opportunity. We've centered them around a few questions, and it's an opportunity for people to have essentially a conversation about how their work has been going, about the future, and how they would like to progress, and any problems that they've had. So we realized that actually bringing the ethos and values into that as well is a really important thing to do. So we created a little bit of a scale to sort of mark yourself on personally, how you feel how you feel you perform against them or react to them, how your line manager might feel and how HR might feel. But it's not a right or wrong thing, it's just a conversation. So if you're maybe not performing, or there's work to do, so the bottom end is work to do performing well, and then excellence. But it's just to enable a conversation around those key points to say, oh, information at the moment, perhaps I'm not doing the right thing, or excellence, I think there's a way to go because my training is at an early stage and, I've got room to improve. But it's not about anyone being wrong or anyone, being exceptional. It's about a conversation, and that's the most important thing, to talk about them and understand where we feel we are, be aware of them, and walk out the door and think, oh, maybe there's a bit of work to do, or I'm doing really well with that. That's great. And to talk about how you're doing really well with them.
Matt, and you do the same. You live and breathe these values all day long, do you? I mean, and you encourage others to do that. Is that your job as MD as well?
My job's to do all sorts of things. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I have to, challenge my managers, I suppose, to, do things the Aber way a little bit. But it's always a conversation about, a particular situation, what the right thing to do in that situation is. But it usually comes back to what the right thing for the person is first and foremost. And then we worry about how we deal with the business situation and how we cope with that.
Good question here from Anonymous. Oh, thanks, Anonymous. How do you encourage and motivate employees when there's no bonus as such and not much trust in the company? I don't think Anonymous is indicating that there's not much trust in the company. But have you got any tips, I suppose, Emma, for motivating and encouraging employees? How would you boost morale? How do you go about boosting morale? What can you share with other HR leads when it comes to energizing and engaging staff? What have you seen work really well? And apart from going to the woods for a chat?
Well, I think that's a very important part of engaging people, actually. And I think that's probably the most important thing. So going back to the original question, we're really fortunate that we do have, it's not a bonus, but we have a profit share, which really engages everybody. It means that everyone has their part to play to make sure that we get that bonus. And we do all, so far we have always had a very, very healthy bonus. But I think that's the most important thing, is making sure that people know that you're there for them, that they can rely on other people within the business, not just Matt or myself, their line managers, their colleagues. And that's part of the people element, the employee element, is that we're all there for one another, that we are all able to support each other. And I think that having that knowledge, whether you need it or not, is one of the most motivating things. But knowing that you're heard and that you have a voice, that is truly so. Although it might be, it's funny that we go to the woods, but the most important part of that is that it's an engagement piece. You don't have to go to the woods. You just have to listen to people and understand them and make sure you're doing the right thing the collective.
It is about spending time with people and building those personal relationships. It's not about the money. And I'll challenge Anonymous to come and actually ask any of my senior staff why they work here, and they will say it's not about the money.
Let's just talk about something that you mentioned earlier, Emma. And I was going to pick up on it, but I thought, no, it's not quite right in the flow, but it actually is quite important. You talked about an incident that happened as you were beginning to come out of the new iteration of EO that really sort of went, right, yeah, we're definitely going to do this. And was it an invitation by any chance to sell? What sort of spurred all of this EO thinking on? Tell us about that. One of you talk about that.
I think we were taken a bit by surprise by it, for one thing, because it wasn't just some massive multinational organization that came from nowhere. I think it was almost a bit more personal than that. And so it was a bit more of a shock to the system. It was somebody that we knew who'd been leading us actually for quite a long time. Well, fairly long time. And and we were all a bit shocked by that. So we
had real insight into your value, the value of the business.
Yeah.
And what was the thing that shocked you?
That they would ask to buy the business and why they wouldn't feel so engaged, because that person at the time was an employee as well of the business. So the fact that we were all employees of the business, but yet that person wanted to own a business on their, outright on their own, was probably a bit shocking. But we also needed to understand what we should do in that kind of situation. So we all knew we wanted to keep it so that it was fair. It's a fair thing that we all are owners of the business and that we all contribute and have a say. But we needed to understand going forward how we would handle that. So the board made a decision not to take that offer, and that we would stay employee owned. But that was where the guiding group work came from. It was understanding how we managed that kind of situation in the future and what everybody wanted from future offers if we were to receive them, and how we would behave as a whole.
It sounds like quite a galvanizing moment for Aber, a sort of watershed to decide, right, are we in this, or are we just going to sell at some point? What's your reaction now? Do you get offers for the business at all?
Yeah, I mean, Aber's a very valuable business. Technically, we probably get an offer every 2 weeks through some letter through the post, which just goes in a shredder. So we,
discuss it.
No, we don't even discuss it. So that piece of work we did there, we looked at ourselves and said, do we really, are we really in this EO thing for the long term? And it was unanimous across the business that that's what we wanted to do. And we built that into our articles. So, it's not even possible actually to sell Aber really anymore. So, it's quite easy. It's quite good as an MD and a board to have that sort of decision made, and then you can just focus on getting on with running the business, growing the business for the employees. The value goes back to the employees, and that's how it should be, really.
But I also think the important thing is it's not just about us, it's about the future generations coming through. It's about going to work with the schools and knowing that our children's children will have a business here for the future that we will have left, that we will no longer be shareholders from. It's making sure that it's a really solid, sustainable business that's here for Aberystwyth for the future.
Yeah.
And West Wales in general.
Val wants to know if the person who made that offer to you, everyone's quite nosy today, aren't they? Like, tell us a bit more about what happened then. Like, I love it. This is great. Good questions. So Val wants to know, did the person who made that offer actually end up staying in the business?
No. So I think part of their motivation was they needed to leave for personal reasons. And Aber was so good, they kind of wanted to take it with them. And I think there's a little bit of that. Yeah. A little bit of that going on, but I'd like to let me read you from our guiding purpose, that bit which Emma talked about, which is just one line. It says, Aber has a past, a present and a future. Each generation benefits from its past, has a responsibility to protect and build it for the future. So that's what the employees decided, and that's what's in our articles, documentation, everything, and that's what we do.
It's very eloquently put, like that. Very
good. It's very unselfish. It's about everybody else, not about us as owners, individuals as owners. It's about a collective.
Yeah.
The next question we've had is from Scott. It's interesting, actually, the way we talk about EO, and we have done yesterday and so far today, is that there's just nothing not to like, okay? It's just great, brilliant. At risk of sound like a fast show character. Brilliant, EO, brilliant. But Scott raises this good point. What do you do if someone doesn't want to be involved with the EO ethos? Is it even possible to have a recruit who goes, oh, this isn't for me, I want hierarchy, I need this? What happens there? Have you had that experience?
Ultimately, they probably leave the business. So definitely there's certain types of people that fit EO businesses at different scales of business as well. Because if you're a business of 10 people, you really got to be very close knit and wear many hats. As you grow and expand, some of those people need to then probably move to other very small businesses because that's where they want to work. But also we've had many hires that just haven't worked out along the way for whatever reason, and some of that will be, that they just don't quite agree with the ethos, really, or can't work in it.
But our turnover is incredibly low, though. It is a low turnover.
The people.
Yeah, you've got low turnover, low absence
turnover
rates, higher productivity rates. I mean, these are all things that most businesses in the UK are desperate to get a hold of and would love to know the secret for this. What's the secret sauce for that? Is it EO? And does EO just bring about greater employee engagement and easier decision making and greater innovation actually as well?
So EO, yeah, I mean, it is about the engagement of the employees, engagement in the business. That will drive any business, I believe. And EO is probably the best way to do that and have the best business. The thing you will sacrifice, though, that other businesses have to understand is that you can't be greedy. You cannot have both ways. You cannot have a person at the top who's all controlling and driving a Rolls Royce and have proper engagement with the employees. You've got to sacrifice that if you want to be the best EO business, really, and best business.
But it's also about having good people and making sure that they're the right people for the business. And we're so fortunate that we have great people who engage in our family without sounding like a cult. That's what we are, you know.
We've had another question from another anonymous saying, do you literally mean the woods, by the way? This is a running theme. So you're not a cult, and yes, you do mean the woods.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's working, isn't it? Whatever you're doing, it's working.
We just had to explain that. We had to find a space that was open air, sheltered, that we could go and safely meet in a pandemic, basically.
Because that was one thing we realized, people were struggling without that interaction. People needed to see people. And I think, you know, as a family, you'll know when you perhaps haven't seen your sister or your mother or your brother for a long period of time in isolation. It's the same here, you know, not seeing one another. We needed that interaction. We needed it for good business, for good communication. Doing everything virtually and via email doesn't work all day long. So that's, you know, part of the reason we needed it. Just to feel human again, as well, as much as anything else. So, you know, it is new. The woods itself thing is new since the pandemic, but there's nothing to say we won't continue it afterwards.
And it'll be interesting to see how many things people do adopt into when business gets back to usual. How many of these sort of habits and things that people have liked, people carry on in the future. I've got a final question for you, and actually kind of tease up this afternoon's panel discussion. And the panel discussion is going to be about employee-owned businesses, or any business doing good business, as in being good in the community, being a conscious capitalist, if you like, thinking more holistically and not just about the bottom line, and being good at business, but also doing well at business. This final question, the founder considering their impact on the regional economy and the desire to stay within Aberystwyth is admirable. Have you been able to measure that impact in any way? Do you ever look at that and go, right, stepping out, let's look at the environmental, the social, the economic, the community? Is there any place that you have in that, or is that maybe work that you will do in the future? I
don't think we proactively measure it particularly.
We don't measure it as such. We assign 1% of our profits every half to charity. And there is a measurement done on our carbon footprint and how we counteract that and balance that by planting trees and such like. But measuring it, no, we probably don't measure it, but we're confident that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest impact Aber has in any community it works in is the fact that we are creating value in that community, and the value stays in the community, whether it's through employee salaries and dividends or whatever, or whether it's because we use local builders and we're developing stuff in this community. You know, it's not being siphoned off to some big group in France or something, you know, or whatever. It's under our control. It stays within the whole mechanism stays within, you know, the local area community.
Yeah,
really.
I think that's important. Even with the charity fund that we have, it has to stay within a 30-mile radius of any employee's main place of work. So it means that, you know, there's an injection within the 30-mile radius of Aberystwyth, but we also have remote workers in Bolton, Abergavenny, Cardiff, California, Washington, and it has that many. If they're, you know, if they want to put money towards a charity, must stay within a 30-mile radius. So it's not going to massive charities, it's going to something that really means something within the area.
And again, this is a theme that I keep hearing, is that we don't really measure stuff. I mean, obviously Aber measures stuff because that's your job, is to help other people measure stuff in biotech, biorenewables, and in brewing as well. Fantastic. But when it comes to business, measuring, measurements, managing measurements, all that sort of stuff is very mainstream and most unlike EO business. Would you agree? And Anonymous, again, has said, it sounds like most EO businesses are just really very humble, getting on with what they do. And I think you've proved that to us today. Is that something you'd agree with? Final thought.
Yeah, we're not good at shouting about things or taking credit, particularly for what we do. We just go on and do it, really.
Yeah, I'm quite fluffy.
And lo and behold, before you know it, you've doubled your turnover in 3 years. Just happens to be the way, doesn't it? So I'm very impressed. And it's been fantastic meeting you both and hearing more about your fantastically successful EO business. And it does sound like a great place to work. If only I'd passed my GCSE science. Never mind, another time. So please give an EO Boost round of applause in your own living room or dining room to Matt Lee and Emma Thomas. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good day.
Thank
you, Penny.
Thank you.